3 years ago, I took Tina to the same beach where we had our first date for our anniversary. I wanted to do something special, so I hired a local artist to paint us right there while we watched the sunset. Cost me $400, which isn't nothing on my salary, but I thought she deserved something meaningful. Let me back up and give you some context about why this beach was important. When Tina and I first met 5 years ago, we were both going through rough patches. I'd just gotten out of a relationship where I constantly felt like I wasn't good enough, and she was dealing with family drama from her parents' messy divorce. On our third date, we ended up at this little beach about an hour outside the city just talking until sunrise. No phones, no distractions, just two people really connecting for the first time in ages. That beach became our place. We'd drive out there whenever life got stressful, whenever we needed to remember why we fell for each other. When I proposed 2 years later, I almost did it there. But Tina had mentioned wanting something more traditional, so I went with the fancy restaurant instead. So for our anniversary, going back to that beach with the artist felt perfect. The guy was really talented. I'd found him through a local art group online. His name was Javier, and he specialized in couples portraits. He spent 3 hours getting every detail right. The way the evening light hit Tina's hair, how the waves looked behind us, even the exact expression on our faces. When it was finished, I was genuinely proud of it. It captured something real about us, something I wanted to remember forever. Tina seemed happy too. She took photos of us holding the painting, posted them on Instagram with captions about how thoughtful her husband was, the whole thing. She even suggested we hang it in the living room where everyone could see it. Fast forward to last weekend. Tina's sister Brinley was having her baby shower, and it was a big family event. Tina's mom Norma was there, along with aunts, cousins, family friends, probably 25 people total. Tina decided to bring the painting to show everyone. She said she wanted to share what a thoughtful husband she had, how creative and romantic I could be. I thought it was sweet that she wanted to share it with her family. I even helped her wrap it carefully so it wouldn't get damaged in the car. That was my first mistake. The second she pulled out the painting at the shower, everything changed. The atmosphere in the room shifted in a way I didn't understand at first. Tina held it up and announced to everyone that this was what her pathetic husband made, a $400 kindergarten scribble. Her mom, Norma, immediately jumped in with this comment about how even her dementia patients at the nursing home where she works paint better than this. Brinley grabbed the canvas from Tina and started going on about how I made poor Tina stand in sand for 3 hours in the heat for this garbage. She was waving it around like it was evidence in a trial. Then Tina started laughing. Not embarrassed laughter, not nervous laughter, genuine, cruel laughter. She said the artist was probably homeless and just look at these deformed faces. She pointed to my face in the painting and said I looked like a confused child, then pointed to her own painted face and said she looked like a melting wax figure. The room erupted. Everyone was laughing, pointing at different parts of the painting, making jokes about how bad it was. Tina's cousin Vernon said it looked like something from a horror movie. Julian, Brinley's husband, said he'd seen better art at gas station tourist traps. One of the aunts said she couldn't believe someone actually charged money for this. And Tina was eating up every second of the attention. She was the center of the show, the star performer in this comedy routine where my thoughtful gesture was the punchline. Then she threw the painting on the floor and stomped on it. Actually stomped on it with her heel, tearing through the canvas. She said it would make the perfect doormat for the new nursery, and everyone cheered like she'd just scored the winning goal. I stood there watching my wife destroy something I'd put real thought and money into, something that represented one of our best memories together. But here's the thing that really gets me. I wasn't even surprised. This is who Tina has always been when she has an audience. She becomes this completely different person, and that person sees me as material for entertainment. I started thinking about all the other times this had happened. When she told everyone at her work Christmas party that I'd tried to make romantic dinner and burned the chicken so badly we had to order pizza. When she shared with her book club how I'd gotten lost using GPS on a weekend trip, and we'd ended up 3 towns over from where we were supposed to be. When she told her friends about how I'd cried during a movie and couldn't stop, making it sound like I was some kind of emotional wreck instead of just someone who got moved by a good story. Every time she'd frame these stories like they were cute or funny, but there was always this undertone of mockery, like she was showing everyone what she had to put up with being married to me. When she tells me my cooking tastes awful, I tell myself she's just being honest. When she rolls her eyes at my suggestions for date nights, I convince myself she's tired from work. When she forgets important things about me but remembers every detail about her friends' lives, I make excuses. When she corrects me in front of other people about things that don't really matter, I tell myself she's just trying to be helpful. But watching her destroy that painting while her family cheered made everything crystal clear. This isn't about the painting. This is about respect. And Tina has never had any for me. The worst part was realizing that this whole thing had been planned. The way everyone jumped in so quickly with their comments, the way they all seemed to know exactly what kind of reaction Tina wanted. This wasn't spontaneous. She'd been setting this up, probably telling them ahead of time what to expect, priming them to react this way. I looked at her, standing there in the middle of the destroyed canvas with this satisfied smile on her face, and I finally understood what our marriage really was. I was the designated target, the person everyone could safely mock because I'd always just take it and make excuses later. I looked right at her and said, "Soon you'll see a new picture of your life." Then I walked out. I could hear the conversation continuing behind me as I left, probably about how sensitive I was, how I couldn't take a joke, how I was ruining Brinley's special day by making everything about me. But I didn't care anymore. I didn't go home that night. Drove straight to my brother Colin's place and told him everything. He looked at me like he'd been waiting years for this conversation. Apparently, my whole family has been watching this pattern for ages and wondering when I'd finally wake up. Colin told me things I'd never heard before. How Tina talks to my family when I'm not around, always with this subtle superiority complex. How she makes little comments about my job not being as important as hers, about my hobbies being childish, about how I'm lucky she's patient enough to deal with my quirks. He said my mom has bitten her tongue so many times about Tina's behavior that she's got permanent bite marks. The next morning, Sunday, my phone started blowing up. It started with just a few texts from Tina asking where I was, if I was okay, saying we needed to talk. But as the day went on, the messages got more frantic. 53 missed calls by noon, 81 text messages by evening. The last one was pure panic. "The house is empty, baby, please." "I'm sorry, I didn't mean it. Where are you? Answer me. I'm at your mother's, but she won't open the door, please." Yeah, because I'd called my mom Sunday morning and told her everything that happened. My mom, who's been polite to Tina for 5 years despite watching her treat me like garbage, who's bitten her tongue through countless family dinners where Tina made little digs at me, who's watched me make excuses for disrespectful behavior over and over again. My mom was done being polite. When Tina showed up at her door demanding to know where I was, my mom told her exactly what she thought of someone who humiliates their spouse for entertainment. Apparently, it was a conversation that was long overdue. I'm not hurt anymore. I'm not even angry. I'm just done. You know that feeling when you finally stop trying to make something work that was broken from the start? When you stop exhausting yourself trying to earn something from someone who's already decided you don't deserve it? That's where I am right now. Tina thinks this is about the painting, but it's not. The painting was just the moment I stopped pretending that someone who publicly humiliates me for entertainment actually loves me. Someone who loves you doesn't destroy your gifts for laughs. Someone who loves you doesn't turn your thoughtful gestures into family comedy shows. Someone who loves you doesn't spend years collecting stories about your mistakes and failures to share with other people. I've been sleeping at Colin's for 3 days now, and I'm sleeping better than I have in months. No walking on eggshells, no wondering what I'll do wrong next, no pretending cruel comments are just jokes, no analyzing every word before I speak to make sure it won't be used against me later. Just peace. My phone keeps buzzing with messages from her family too. Apparently word has gotten around that I'm the villain for abandoning Tina over a silly argument. Norma sent me a long text about how marriage requires forgiveness and compromise. Brinley wrote that I was being dramatic and throwing away years of marriage over one misunderstanding. Vernon said I was proving I can't handle family humor and that Tina deserves better than someone so sensitive. But I'm not responding to any of them because I finally understand something I should have learned years ago. Respect isn't something you can earn from someone who's already decided you don't deserve it. And I'm done trying to prove my worth to people who've made it clear they'll never see it. The crazy part is how much clearer everything looks now. All those times Tina said she was just being honest when she criticized me. All those moments when she'd correct me in front of other people about things that didn't matter. All those occasions when she'd share embarrassing stories about me with her friends and then act like I was being too sensitive when I said it bothered me. I spent 5 years thinking I needed to be better, more interesting, less sensitive, more successful. I thought if I just tried harder, if I was more thoughtful, if I did more romantic gestures, if I was funnier or smarter or more confident, then maybe she'd finally see me as someone worthy of basic respect. But you can't earn respect from someone who fundamentally sees you as beneath them. And Tina has always seen me as beneath her. I said what I needed to say at that baby shower. Soon Tina will see exactly what her life looks like without someone in it who actually cared about making her happy. Without someone who remembered what mattered to her, who planned thoughtful surprises, who tried to create meaningful memories together. She'll learn what it's like when the person who absorbed all her criticism and mockery isn't there anymore to be the designated target. When there's no one left who's willing to be the punchline to make her feel superior. And maybe someday she'll realize that destroying a $400 painting was the most expensive mistake she ever made. Update 1. It's been a week since my last post, and honestly, I didn't expect this level of chaos. Thanks to everyone who commented with support, it helped more than you know when I was questioning whether I was overreacting. So Tina's family has decided to launch a full campaign to get me back. It started Tuesday when her mom Norma showed up at my workplace. Our receptionist called me down because there was a woman in the lobby claiming to be my mother-in-law with some kind of emergency. I went down thinking maybe someone was in the hospital or something serious had happened. Instead, Norma was standing there with a folder full of papers, telling me in front of the entire lobby that I was destroying her daughter's life over a misunderstanding. She opened the folder and pulled out printouts of old text messages between me and Tina from when we were dating. Messages where I'd told Tina I loved her, where I'd made plans for our future, where I'd talked about wanting to make her happy forever. Norma started reading some of these out loud, asking how I could throw away someone I'd made all these promises to. Here's what got me, though. I recognized those screenshots immediately. They were from a phone I'd lost 2 years ago. The only way Tina could have those messages is if she'd been systematically saving screenshots of our private conversations, probably building some kind of insurance file in case she ever needed ammunition. I told Norma she needed to leave or I'd call security. She got louder, saying real men work through problems instead of running away, that I was abandoning Tina in her time of need. My coworkers were coming out of elevators wondering what was happening. Then Norma played what she thought was her winning card. She told me Tina was pregnant. For about 30 seconds, everything shifted. All my resolve wavered because if that was true, it changed everything. But then I remembered Tina had started her period just 4 days before the baby shower. I know because she'd complained about cramps and asked me to pick up pain medication. I asked Norma exactly when Tina found out she was pregnant. She said 2 days ago, which made it impossible given the timeline. When I called her out on lying, she started backtracking about how Tina thought she might be pregnant, that they were waiting to be sure. Security escorted her out, but not before she announced to the lobby that I was the kind of man who abandons pregnant women. My boss came down to check on me, and thankfully he's been married 20 years and recognized desperation when he saw it. But that was just the beginning. Wednesday evening, my mom called saying Brinley had contacted her on Facebook. Tina's sister was trying to convince my mom that I was having some kind of mental breakdown and needed an intervention. The message my mom forwarded me was unbelievable. According to Brinley, I've always been unstable, and Tina had been covering for me for years. She said the painting incident was just the latest example of my inability to handle normal social situations. That Tina had been protecting me from family criticism about my awkward behavior. But here's what really got me. Brinley included details about conversations that only Tina could have told her. Specific things I'd said to Tina in private about feeling like her family didn't accept me. Worries I'd shared about not being good enough for her. Insecurities I'd confided during vulnerable moments. Tina had been sharing my private thoughts with her sister and using them to build this narrative about my mental state. Every time I'd opened up about feeling inadequate or worried about fitting in, she'd been collecting that information as evidence against me. My mom was furious. She responded to Brinley with some choice words about families who gang up on one person and then play victim when that person stands up for themselves. She also mentioned she'd be happy to share her thoughts about Tina's character if Brinley wanted to keep playing games. The real turning point came Thursday, when Tina showed up at the gym at Collins Complex. She'd somehow figured out my routine and was waiting in the parking lot when I came out. She looked terrible, like she hadn't slept in days, and I almost felt bad for her. She told me she'd been doing a lot of thinking about our relationship and realized she'd been taking me for granted, that she wanted to go to couples therapy, that she was willing to set boundaries with her family, that she understood how disrespectful the painting incident was. For a moment, I almost believed her. This vulnerable, accountable version of Tina was the person I'd fallen in love with. But then she said something that revealed her real motivation. She mentioned that she'd been talking to her friend who went through a divorce last year, and how expensive it gets, how much hassle it is, how it ruins your credit. That's when I realized this wasn't about love or missing me. This was about Tina doing the math and realizing that being married to someone she doesn't respect is more convenient than supporting herself. I told her therapy might have been an option months ago, but not after discovering she'd been documenting my vulnerabilities to share with her family, not after her family's harassment campaign. She started crying, but it felt different this time, more frustrated than sad. She said I was being stubborn and holding grudges, that everyone makes mistakes, that I was punishing her for one bad moment instead of looking at all the good times. So I asked her to name one good time we'd had in the past year that didn't involve me doing something for her or giving her something she wanted. She couldn't answer. Then I asked what she actually likes about me as a person. Not what I do for her, not how I make her life easier, but what qualities I have that she genuinely appreciates and respects. She got angry, said I was playing games, asking trick questions, trying to make her look bad. That marriage isn't about keeping score, but about commitment and working through problems. But I wasn't trying to trick her. I genuinely wanted to know if there was anything about me she valued beyond my utility in her life. Her inability to answer told me everything. The conversation ended with her accusing me of already having someone else lined up, because according to her, nobody leaves a marriage this quickly unless they have another option. When I said that wasn't true, she decided I must be having some kind of midlife crisis because normal people don't throw away years of marriage over family drama. Since then, my phone has been quiet. No more calls, no more texts, no more family members showing up places. I think they finally realized I'm not coming back. Yesterday, I signed a lease on my own apartment. It's nothing fancy, but it's mine. No one's going to criticize my cooking or roll their eyes at my interests or use my private thoughts as ammunition against me. Colin helped me move some stuff from the house while Tina was at work. It was weird being back there, seeing all the things we'd accumulated together. But what struck me most was how much lighter I felt walking out for what I knew was the last time. Some people have asked if I regret leaving or if I think I overreacted. Here's my honest answer. I regret staying as long as I did. I regret making excuses for behavior I never should have tolerated. I regret believing that love means accepting disrespect as long as it's packaged as humor. But I don't regret leaving. For the first time in years, I wake up without anxiety about what I might do wrong that day. I don't second-guess every word before I speak. I don't worry about whether my interests and opinions are worth sharing. The painting might be destroyed, but what it represented, a man who thought his wife deserved thoughtful gestures, who believed in romance, who tried to create meaningful memories, that guy is still here. He just deserves better than someone who sees his efforts as material for mockery. Tina will figure out what her life looks like without someone willing to be the designated target for her entertainment. And I'm going to figure out what mine looks like when I'm not walking on eggshells anymore. Update 2. It's been 2 weeks since my last update, and things have taken a direction I didn't see coming. Thanks again to everyone who's been following this mess. Your perspectives have helped me stay grounded when everything felt upside down. So after all the harassment from Tina's family died down, I thought that was the end of it. But last Friday, Colin suggested something that caught me off guard. He said maybe I should consider going to family therapy, not couples therapy with Tina, but family therapy with my own family to process what had happened. I was resistant at first because honestly, I felt like I'd already figured everything out. Tina was disrespectful, her family enabled it, I left, end of story. But Colin pointed out that this whole situation had affected our entire family, and maybe it would help to talk through it with a professional present. The session was me, Colin, my mom, and Dr. Martinez, a family therapist Colin had worked with before during his divorce. I figured it would be pretty straightforward. Everyone would validate that I'd made the right choice. We'd talk about how to move forward, maybe discuss how to handle holidays if Tina and I end up divorced. Instead, Dr. Martinez started asking questions about patterns in my relationships that made me uncomfortable. She wanted to know about my relationship before Tina, about my friendships, about how I typically handle conflict. She asked my family what they'd observed about my relationship patterns over the years. That's when my mom said something that completely blindsided me. She told Dr. Martinez that she'd been worried about me for a long time because I seemed to attract people who needed to feel superior to someone else. She said it started in college with my friend group, continued with my ex-girlfriend before Tina, and then escalated with Tina herself. Colin jumped in with examples I'd never connected before. How in college, I was always the one in our friend group who got made fun of for being too serious or too sensitive. How my ex-girlfriend used to correct me constantly in front of other people, and I'd just laugh it off. How when I started dating Tina, he noticed the same pattern but figured I'd grown out of accepting that treatment. Dr. Martinez asked me how I typically responded when someone criticized me or made jokes at my expense. I said I usually tried to be a good sport about it, that I didn't want to be the person who couldn't take a joke. She asked if I could remember learning that response somewhere. That's when I realized something I'd never put together before. My dad left when I was 8, and my mom went through a really tough period afterward. She was dealing with her own pain and stress, and I became the kid who never caused problems, who always tried to make things easier for everyone else, who absorbed criticism without fighting back, because that felt safer than creating more conflict. It wasn't my mom's fault. She was doing her best in an impossible situation. But somewhere along the way, I learned that my role in relationships was to be the person who absorbed negativity so other people could feel better about themselves. I became really good at being everyone's emotional support system while convincing myself it was just being nice. Dr. Martinez helped me see that what happened with the painting wasn't really about Tina being unusually cruel. It was about me finally hitting my limit with a pattern I'd been unconsciously perpetuating for decades. Tina had gotten comfortable treating me poorly because I'd trained her to expect that I would absorb it and make excuses for her behavior. This led to a really difficult conversation about whether leaving Tina was actually about standing up for myself, or whether it was just another way of avoiding conflict by removing myself from the situation instead of addressing the underlying dynamic. My first instinct was to get defensive, because everything in me wanted to believe I'd finally learned to set boundaries and demand respect. But Dr. Martinez asked me a question that really stuck. What would it look like if instead of leaving when someone treats you poorly, you stayed and insisted they treat you better? She wasn't saying I should go back to Tina. That relationship had too much damage and broken trust. But she was asking whether I'd actually learned to advocate for myself, or whether I'd just learned to escape when things got uncomfortable. The more we talked, the more I realized I'd never actually told Tina directly that her behavior was unacceptable. I'd made excuses, I'd rationalized, I'd absorbed the criticism, and then when it reached a breaking point, I'd left. But I'd never sat her down and said clearly that the way she treated me was damaging our relationship and needed to stop. Colin pointed out that this was exactly what had happened with my college friends, too. Instead of addressing the dynamic where I was everyone's target, I just gradually stopped hanging out with them. Same with my ex-girlfriend. When the criticism became too much, I'd ended the relationship but never actually confronted the behavior directly. Dr. Martinez explained that people who grow up learning to avoid conflict often swing between two extremes, absorbing everything until they can't take it anymore, then cutting people off completely. She said healthy relationships require the messy middle ground of ongoing communication about problems before they become deal breakers. This was hard to hear because part of me felt proud of finally leaving a situation that wasn't good for me. And Dr. Martinez was clear that leaving Tina was probably the right choice given how much damage had been done. But she helped me see that if I want future relationships to be different, I need to learn how to address problems when they're small instead of waiting until they're catastrophic. We spent a lot of time talking about what it would look like for me to practice advocacy in smaller situations. Speaking up when a friend makes a joke at my expense instead of laughing along. Telling my family when something bothers me instead of just absorbing it. Setting boundaries with coworkers instead of just accepting extra work to avoid disappointing people. The session ended with Dr. Martinez giving me some homework. She wants me to identify 3 situations in the next week where I would normally absorb criticism or discomfort, and instead practice speaking up directly but respectfully about how I'd prefer to be treated. It's been challenging because my instinct is still to just smooth things over or remove myself from conflict. But I'm starting to understand that learning to stay present during difficult conversations might be more important for my growth than learning when to walk away. Yesterday, Colin made a joke about my cooking that would normally make me laugh it off and feel a little hurt inside. Instead, I told him that, actually, his comment stung a bit and I'd prefer if he found a more constructive way to give feedback about my food. He apologized immediately and said he hadn't realized his comments came across that way. It was such a small moment, but it felt huge to me. Instead of absorbing the criticism and making excuses for him or getting angry and storming off, I just stated my preference clearly and gave him a chance to adjust his behavior. And he did. I'm still glad I left my marriage with Tina. The damage there was too extensive and the pattern had become too entrenched. But I'm grateful for the therapy session because it's helping me understand how to approach relationships differently. Moving forward, the goal isn't to find someone who will never criticize me or challenge me. The goal is to build relationships with people who can handle direct communication about problems, who want to treat me well when I tell them how their behavior affects me, and who see conflict resolution as something we do together rather than something I absorb alone. Final update. This is probably my last update on this situation, and I wanted to share how everything finally resolved. A lot has happened since my therapy session, and I think I found the closure I didn't even know I was looking for. 3 weeks ago, Tina reached out again, but this time it was different. Instead of the frantic texts or showing up places, she sent me a long message saying she'd been thinking about our conversation at the gym and wanted to talk properly. She said she understood if I didn't want to see her, but she felt like we both deserved a real conversation about what had happened and what went wrong. I almost ignored it, honestly. Part of me felt like I'd already moved on and didn't need to revisit everything. But Dr. Martinez had been working with me on not avoiding difficult conversations, and something about Tina's message felt different from her previous attempts to get me back. We met at a neutral location, a coffee shop neither of us had been to before. Tina looked tired, but more composed than I'd seen her in weeks. She started by apologizing for her family's behavior, which surprised me because I'd expected her to defend them or make excuses. She told me she'd had some difficult conversations with Norma and Brinley after their workplace and Facebook stunts. Apparently, she'd been so focused on getting me back that she hadn't really thought about how their interference was making things worse. When her mom showed up at my job, it finally hit her how far this had all spiraled. But then Tina said something that really got my attention. She told me she'd been thinking about the questions I'd asked her at the gym, about what she liked about me as a person, about whether she could name recent good times that weren't just me doing things for her. She said she'd spent weeks trying to come up with answers and realized she couldn't. She admitted that somewhere along the way, she'd stopped seeing me as a partner and started seeing me as someone whose job it was to make her life easier and more pleasant. She said she'd gotten comfortable taking my efforts for granted because I never complained or set boundaries about how she responded to them. This led to a really long conversation about how our dynamic had developed. Tina explained that early in our relationship, she'd been dealing with a lot of stress from her family's drama and her demanding job. When I stepped up to handle more household stuff and emotional support, it felt like such a relief that she just let me keep taking on more and more. She said that over time, she started to resent that I was always trying to fix things or make gestures because it made her feel like I thought she needed to be managed or cheered up all the time. But instead of talking to me about feeling patronized, she started responding with criticism and eye-rolling. I told her that from my perspective, it felt like nothing I did was ever good enough, so I kept trying harder and being more thoughtful, which apparently made her feel even more managed. We'd gotten into this cycle where I was trying to prove my worth through gestures, and she was trying to assert her independence by rejecting them. The painting incident, she said, was the culmination of months of feeling like I was treating her like a project instead of a partner. When her family started making jokes about it, instead of defending the gesture, she joined in because it felt like a way to finally express her frustration with always being on the receiving end of my attempts to fix or romance our relationship. None of this excused the public humiliation or the cruelty of destroying something meaningful to me, but it helped me understand that we'd both contributed to a dynamic where she felt infantilized and I felt unappreciated, and neither of us had addressed it directly. I shared some of what I'd learned in therapy about my pattern of absorbing criticism and conflict avoidance. I told her that I'd realized I'd never actually told her when her behavior hurt me or asked her to treat me differently. I'd just absorbed it and tried to compensate with more gestures, which apparently made everything worse. Tina said she wished I'd told her years ago that her comments were hurtful, instead of just trying to prove her wrong with more romantic gestures. She said if I'd said directly that I needed her to speak to me more kindly or appreciate my efforts differently, she would have tried to change her approach. But we both acknowledged that there was too much damage to rebuild from. Even if we understood the dynamic better now, the pattern of hurt and resentment had become too entrenched. The trust was broken, and neither of us felt capable of starting over with someone who had that much painful history. The conversation ended with something I didn't expect: genuine, mutual respect. Not the kind of conversation where one person is right and the other is wrong, but where two people recognize that they brought out the worst in each other and take responsibility for their part in a destructive dynamic. Tina apologized for the painting incident and acknowledged that regardless of her frustrations, destroying something meaningful to me in front of her family was cruel and unacceptable. I apologized for never communicating directly about problems and for trying to solve relationship issues with gestures instead of conversation. We talked about practical things like dividing belongings and handling shared accounts. It was sad, but also weirdly relieving to have a conversation where we were both trying to understand what had gone wrong instead of trying to be right or get back together. Since then, I've been applying what I learned from that conversation to other relationships. When my mom made a comment about my cooking last week that would normally make me defensive, I told her directly that I'd prefer constructive feedback rather than jokes about my food. When a coworker tried to dump extra work on me at the last minute, I said no politely but firmly, instead of just accepting it and feeling resentful. The biggest revelation has been how much energy I was spending on managing other people's emotions and reactions, always trying to anticipate what would make people happy, absorbing criticism to avoid conflict, making grand gestures to compensate for relationship problems instead of addressing them directly. I'm still glad I left my marriage. The dynamic had become too toxic to repair, and I needed the space to figure out my own patterns. But I'm grateful for that final conversation with Tina, because it helped me understand that leaving wasn't just about standing up for myself. It was about recognizing that we'd created something unhealthy together. Moving forward, I want to build relationships where problems get addressed when they're small, where both people can express frustration without cruelty, and where gestures come from love rather than desperation to prove worth. I'm not sure what romantic relationships will look like for me in the future, but I know they'll be different. I'm learning to speak up about my needs before resentment builds, to set boundaries without feeling guilty, and to see conflict as something to work through together rather than something to avoid or absorb alone. The painting is still destroyed, and I'll never get back the years I spent in a relationship where I felt like I had to earn basic respect. But I've learned more about myself in the past 2 months than I did in the previous 5 years. Sometimes the most valuable thing that comes from a broken relationship is understanding how not to repeat the same patterns again. Thanks to everyone who followed this story and offered support. It helped more than you know to have people validate that what happened wasn't okay, while also helping me think through what I wanted to do differently moving forward.